and welcome to Earth is Waking Up. I'm your host, Jeremy Anderson. Today, our guest, Dr. Thaddeus Gala. Welcome.
Thank you. This is great. I'm looking forward to it.
So Dr. Thaddeus is a chiropractor who was raised in rural Oregon, similar to me, but a little further out. Where he witnessed a complete transformation of his mother's health decline and ultimate recovery from a painful and severe case of fibromyalgia. Ever since watching his mother's health transform from a bedridden illness to the vibrant health coach she is today, he has been inspired and dedicated to pursuing and promoting health as his professional life's work in natural medicine. Dr. Thaddeus Gala is the founder and medical director of Complete Care Health Centers in Southern Oregon and drthadgala.com. Dr. Gala performs educational health lectures on nutrition, weight loss, and diabetic management within the clinic and at various locations across the country. He's nationally published research and has been the keynote speaker at schools and teaching facilities, including audiences of over 1,000 attendees. He's the author of several publications, including The Secret to Defy Disease and Decay and The Cookbook to Defy Disease and Decay. He has collaborated with many of the top researchers in the nutrition field and continues in striving for providing the most up-to-date nutritional advances for the lay and scientific communities. Again, welcome.
Thank you. This is great. Looking forward to it.
Yeah. So I wonder if you could talk a little more about how your mother's experiences influenced you, about what age you started to kind of click, and then the direction you went and you got into school and so forth.
Yeah. So when I was 10, I remember there's pictures of me remodeling the kitchen with my dad to get ready for her wheelchair. So it didn't really click. It really didn't click then. All I knew is that mom was sick and not feeling well, and we really didn't have a mom. And she went to expert after expert, doctor after doctor. They all told her she'd be in a wheelchair the rest of her life. So growing up, I think that was pretty hard, but I was too young to really know what normal should be, really. You know, when you're growing up, everything that happens seems to just be the way the world works. And so really, as I got older and I started realizing how her health and our lives were affected, and how her life, how she was able to actually get back to work, even though she still had to use braces on her arms and she was hardly able to function, but a chiropractor was able to get her back to actually working again, maybe like 50% improved. Since then, I've dedicated my career to naturally, or to finding natural ways that people can improve their health without the use of drugs or surgery. Fast forward, now we have 4 integrative medical clinics that help people with a non-pharmacological, non-surgical primary approach to healthcare. My mom is in her 70s. She just started running 5K races. Now she wins them in her age group. She's our lead health coach. She has to find younger and younger friends. She's in complete remission. She's on no medications. And I think last year we saw about 49,000 patient interactions among all of our clinics. So we help people reversing everything from Parkinson's, diabetes, Alzheimer's, cancer, fibromyalgia, neuritis, migraines, headaches, back pain, essentially any lifestyle-induced condition that you can think of. We have a whole wide variety of practitioners that help to ameliorate and reverse those conditions.
Wow, that's pretty amazing. I'm just soaking it in already. Reversing Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, dementia. I mean, those are huge. My grandma suffered for years, ever since her husband died back in '83, I think it was. She was kind of ready to go. She just wanted to be with him, and so her body went into that natural decline where it was dying. She was in good health and didn't pass until she was, I think, 93.
Oh wow! Yeah.
And but her dementia the last few years was bad. I remember talking with her, and she couldn't remember her daughter's name. She couldn't remember who I was, but she could tell me about some of her childhood stories. I thought that was pretty interesting to see.
Yeah, it's pretty sad when you see the brain starting to revert back to, you see all these synapses. What's really happening is you see all these synapses starting to disconnect. No different than when someone's young and their synapses haven't connected yet. They have poor balance. They can't talk. They, just think like a baby. Essentially, that's what's happening as our brain is rotting and it's going back to essentially being an infant again. And that's why people with dementia and Alzheimer's, all these things, neurologically, physiologically, that's what's going on. So yeah, one of the things we do is how do we keep those synapses happy and healthy and connected so they don't essentially decay and revert back to to being an infant again mentally.
Right. So can you talk real quick, basically, to the layperson, what the protocol looks like? Are we using herbs? Are we using um, particular biofeedback, or how are we?
Yeah,
How are we
great question. So I would say, think of it like your car, right? So if a car isn't running, what would you do for it? You know, I mean, you take it to a mechanic, and the mechanic has to diagnose. I mean, just think of our bodies no different than that. And if you have all the parts of your car and an engine working right and in alignment and functioning properly, the car will run great. But if you have one wire that's shorted, it may be your ignition switch and your car's not going to run at all, or it may be, something else on the dash, and maybe some of your gauges aren't going to work. So you have to go through, first off, you have to have a practitioner in your corner, or a mindset of the individual is the first and foremost of recognizing, I guess in essence, a perspective of first principles thinking, and really breaking it down to what do I want, and in order to get there, reverse engineering it all the way back. And very few people, I think, do that exercise. So number one, it's getting the mindset surrounded that health isn't a special pill. It's not a special supplement. It's not a magic hack. It's none of that. It's a mindset. Because if you have the right mindset, you will win just about every time. And so once you have the right mindset, I found is that people looking at health as from a long time frame preference, that's how you're going to win short term. And I know it kind of sounds counterproductive, but by planning for the long term, you win short term because the very nature of setting up your thought process and your structure that way forces you into that trajectory. So to get a little more tangible in terms of what we actually do with people is we essentially look at the vehicle of someone's body, and we say, okay, what are the components of this, and what do we need to make it work right? What do we, just like a car, we have to, the wheels need to work, the engine needs to work, you need to have fuel in the system, you need to have a good driver, you need to have a roadmap where you're going, all these things. Same thing with your body. And so if you can do all these things, let's just use the dementia, for example. If you make sure that the brain and basically it's just looking at nerves. What do nerves need to be happy and healthy and to flourish and to function to their optimal being? Well, we know that we need to have a low inflammatory environment. So we get rid of inflammation, subclinical inflammation in the body. And it's not just enough for people to say, oh, well, yeah, I don't think I have a lot of inflammation. You need to actually test for it. So there's different labs and ways to test for it. And the problem is that some of the tests that we have, they're not sensitive or specific enough. So even though someone may have, out of the dozen inflammatory tests that are out there, they may show up negative on quite a few of them, but it still doesn't mean that they don't have localized subclinical inflammation, let's say in the brain, that's slowly rotting away these nerve synapses that's making them turn back into an infinite type brain capacity. So we need to look at, first off, what are the eroding factors and get rid of those in the life. And then what are all the things that then we can add in to really help that flourish? And there's about a dozen things in there. There's, we want to make sure that stress is low. And when I say these things, it's not enough just to say, oh yeah, well, I have low stress. There needs to be an objective way that you evaluate it. Not just a subjective. There we have to get rid of low-grade infections. A lot of people say, oh, I don't have an infection. Well, most people don't realize that I think it's like 50 to 60% of the population has a low-grade systemic infection that they don't realize. So again, you have to have objective tests. So if someone just says, well, I don't have an infection, say, well, what specific tests have you done to make sure that you've ruled that out, that you don't have issues in your gut with a dysbiosis or with things out of alignment? How do you know that you don't have maybe a subclinical gingivitis or something in your mouth, or that you have something in your brain? A lot of these other low grade infections, and I can go on down the line, but with all the things that we look at, but at the end of the day, you need to have an objective way of determining if you're healthy in each one of these areas, and then correcting areas that are blatantly out of alignment, and then drastically pursuing the areas that of all those areas, drastically pursuing the areas that objectively are going to give you the best chance of being healthy at both short and long term.
Okay. Yeah, the inflammation is a key factor. And I know that there's, in fact, some newer science showing that a lot of it stems even in the mouth. I don't know if you include that, but
It's one of a lot of places to look.
yeah,
And
great.
that's the thing, is that's exactly it is it's to look at something like that, but then to say, oh, well, if this didn't turn up something, it's like, oh, I'm free. Well, there's a lot of other areas to look into.
Yeah, so it sounds like you do sort of a holistic evaluation of the body and see where it is. And how do you nail down where, if there's a localized inflammation somewhere? Do you have?
Yeah, great question. So typically one of the best and easiest ways to start with people is to start with what their pain point is. You know, if someone comes in and whatever they're complaining of, or whatever is, you know, kind of the whack-a-mole, right? Whatever one is the highest on their complaint scale, that's where we start first. And then once they start, because really that's their pain point, right? So if someone comes in and they have Parkinson's and they can't swallow, they're having nightmares, they can't function, they can't, you know, they're having maybe trouble breathing or shuffling, or, you know, all these other problems that come with unaddressed Parkinson's. Or if you just, you know, people just give it Cinemat or L-Dopa or these medications, which just actually makes the disease accelerate faster, sadly. So first off, we have to look at these people and realize, in terms of what their main complaint is. And then usually we address that first. So if someone's main issue is, let's say, Parkinson's, we're going to focus on their Parkinson's, not necessarily that they're having maybe back pain, you know, just as a dichotomy of where we'd focus. So we're triaging them and focusing on what thing is most important to them first. So if someone comes in and they have Parkinson's, well, it's clear that they have a neurodegenerative issue in their brain. So we need to focus on how do we get inflammation down in the brain? How do we get them healthier? Now, and I'm not trying to birdwalk too much, but we also know that there's a protein called alpha-synuclein that gets deposited in Parkinson's, for example. And we know that alpha-synuclein, it's been shown that actually that can be produced in the gut. So we look at the gut, and then we actually show that there's actually research to suggest that alpha-synuclein, this protein, actually can travel via the vagus nerve from the gut and get deposited into the brain. So there's actually a highway that goes from the gut directly to the brain that this protein can travel on and get deposited and cause all kinds of problems. So if someone has problems with their brain, and Parkinson's or Alzheimer's or dementia or just poor mental fog or whatever the case may be, we have to look at their gut. Plus, you know, I could spout off a dozen other body systems that we need to look at as well and make sure that are functioning. But that would be one of the first things that we'd look at to see if our interventions are working, and if the lifestyle changes are working. It would be something like that. Like they're well, I mean, like one gal, gosh, she couldn't smell. Oh no, her husband couldn't smell, and she was so excited because her husband could start smelling again. I think it was after maybe 15 years. He couldn't smell, so his nerves were essentially dead. And it was funny because he said it was a pro and con. He said, it's great because I can smell again, but he's like, I also realized how many bad smells, and he was talking about skunks on the road. He's like, also, I realized how many things that I had been completely oblivious to for the last, 10 or 15 years, now that I got my smell back. So yeah, I mean, when you approach those things, people can get their smell back, their hearing back, their balance back, their swallowing, digestion back, all these kind of things. I mean, all the stuff that we're saying, I know it sounds, crazy and off the charts and all these things, but we see it every day in our clinics. So it's I have no problem saying it.
Yeah. So I think another one that's getting to be more commonly known to some extent, that's still pretty mysterious, is autoimmune conditions and autoimmune responses in the body. And I'm guessing that this reducing the inflammation helps, or is a key part of reversing those.
That's a really great point. So I would encourage people to think of it like this. Think of autoimmune as your body being full on too much inflammation. And because autoimmune really is, in essence, so you can think of it like this. Let's pretend that you get a bacterial infection in the most benign senses. So you get a bacterial infection and your body mounts an immune response to fight that off. So your body fights that off. But when you do that, what happens? Let's just say the classical example, you get sick, you get a fever, maybe you get a runny nose, you get congested, you get really lethargic, you get weak, you kind of just hole up and lay in bed for a week or so, recovering that. And then when you come out the other side, it's, oh my gosh, I feel great. But also during that time, you're weak, you're tired, typically your joints ache. So you have all these problems that go on. Well, what's happening is when you have this bacterial this bacterial response, your body's mounting an immune response to fight, or this bacteria experience, your body's mounting this immune response to fight this off. But when it creates and releases all these chemicals to fight off this bacteria, it's releasing a bunch of stuff that can affect other areas in your body. And what happens is that when we have autoimmune, what's happening is we don't necessarily have a bacterial infection, but we have an immune system that's been turned on, and it's staying on. And it's staying on for so long that, let's say, that joint ache or that weakness, now that becomes an all the time thing. So it becomes our new normal. So just like if you get a bacterial infection, you feel weak. Same thing when your immune system is up. That's why a lot of people with autoimmune issues, they have weakness, they have fatigue, they have poor sleep, they have oftentimes joint pain, they have poor mental clarity. They have low, mood affect in terms of they don't really want to engage in life. They're maybe depressed. And then that snowballs into maybe they're more disconnected with their spouse, with their partner, with society, with their work, their job, and their world just kind of closes in, and life is miserable. So what do? Then they revert to short time frame preference activities, such as I'm going to eat some junk food because it's going to make me feel good right now, which is going to further add more flames to the autoimmune response. And then you get in this downward spiral and cycle.
Yeah. So, yeah, super systemic. You'd mentioned something earlier about changing the mindset. And when you change the mindset, then it kind of makes it inevitable that you'll get what you're going for, whether it's reversing Alzheimer's, dementia, or any other number of health issues. So we had a hypnotherapist on the summit as well. What sort of strategies do you use to kind of make sure that the mindset is beyond the conscious level?
Yeah, I think living an examined life and really working on. So I think meditation is great. I really like having a mindfulness practice around meditation.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, mindfulness is being mindful of your thoughts and thinking about your thinking, and really, really embracing that, and observing, kind of like the phrase observing the observer, if you will. I think and just like, you can't play a game and watch yourself at the same time. That's why you have a coach, because a coach is able to stand over here and watch you engage, and they have a vantage point that is so much better than you have, because you can't watch yourself. So you have a coach over here that can watch the whole thing transpire in front of them, and they can give feedback on areas that you can't see. So it's putting yourself in that coach perspective for yourself without having a coach. So when I say observing the observer, so we go through life and we're the observer of life, watching life unfold in front of us. And so it's how can you step outside of that and really watch this movie unfolding, and essentially be a movie critic of your own movie and the theater that's taking place in front of your eyes every day. So for me, one of the things that I do in a tangible sense is I actually envision myself about a foot or two up and to the right, watching myself. And if I do that, a couple things happen. Number one is I find that I can be almost emotionally detached from being in the trenches and the outcome. And so I can become more invested in the process rather than the end result. And I'm a big fan of, if you invest in the process, you're always going to win. If you invest in the end result, you may or may not win. I think of maybe marriage like the same thing. If your end goal is the end process, which is to be married all the way until you're dead, well, that may or may not win. But if you wake up every day investing in the process to be the best partner you can be every day, well, you're always going to win every single day. And so if you can observe yourself up here, again, like I envision myself, then I can watch myself. And if I find myself maybe getting frustrated about something or worked up or upset, then essentially I realize that I'm lost in thought down here. And I say, oh, so I observe the observer and I say, okay, so what's actually really going on? And just the very act of doing that, I found it's been interesting as hack, if you will, that it takes me out of the emotional state right here. So I had a vehicle stolen, and I remember walking up and it was gone, and it didn't bother me because as soon as I saw it, I was like, oh, well, okay, that's a bummer. And everyone that was with me said, oh my gosh, and they were so upset for me. I thought, well, I mean, it's not going to do any good. So because what I did is as I immediately removed myself to here, or I was already kind of living there and watching, and I was able to decide how I wanted to respond. And so I looked at it and thought, oh man, that's a bummer. Well, I don't have it anymore. Well, I hope whoever has that, they probably needed it more than I do. And I hope it's making their life better, and it makes the world a better place on some level. And so, but to go to that, think about how much healthier that was for me than, oh my gosh, that blankety blank, which would be our normal response. And vast majority of people wouldn't would think that was a completely appropriate response.
Yeah.
And by me not having that response, that was almost deemed inappropriate by some of the people that were in my immediate circle at the time that were watching it unfold.
Not reactive.
So, what's that?
You're not reactive enough.
Yeah, I wasn't reactive enough. I wasn't upset enough. So, it's kind of like, oh, it's not here. Okay, well, what's for dinner? And I mean, obviously, I took some other steps rather than that, but that was kind of the mindset of like, okay, well, we can't really do much about it right now due to the circumstances. So, what are we going to do for dinner tonight, you guys? Let's go get something to eat, and we can talk about it and do whatever. But it was the idea of observing the observer and watching yourself, and it's so powerful when you're dealing with a loved one or a colleague or basically any relationship in life, and you feel yourself maybe getting worked up or bent out of shape or frustrated or angry. And it can be the same with yourself, because think about it, you're driving, you're at the stoplight, wherever you're at in life, and you have this internal dialogue, this self-talk that we don't even know where our thoughts come from. And that's, I'm in the camp I don't believe in that there's a free will. So when we look at the stream of thoughts that's all day long coming through, we're just watching these thoughts unfold, and we can either step outside for a moment and say, okay, am I going to feed this, or am I going to redirect it? So to me, it's being mindful to step outside. And really, once you do this exercise, I think just a handful of times, it is absolutely game changing. Because once you step outside and you really know this, and when you actually do it and embrace it, you'll feel a shift, you'll feel a click, because then you'll realize in one of your first emotionally frustrating experiences, you'll realize that you're completely, I don't know what the right word would be, but you're completely even keel and deciding your emotions. And it's immeasurably, impactfully powerful in terms of giving you better peace of mind, lower stress, reducing inflammation as a result, and putting you in the driver's seat of the movie that's unfolding before your eyes.
For sure, including reducing inflammation, because you're reducing the stress levels on the body, the cortisol. Bingo. And all that.
Bingo.
So, this is powerful, and a lot of times people hear about mindfulness and meditation, but they're kind of daunting. How did you come across this and learn to implement it in your life in such a powerful way?
Yeah, great question. I think it's the phrase, surround, don't be the smartest person in the room. And I think always try to be learning. And I think for me, it was, kind of asking yourself, when something's going on in your life and you feel justified for it, ask yourself, well, how well is that serving me? And is this thought process really the best version of myself? And so it's surrounding myself with people that I aspire to be like, or that I admire, or that I appreciate, and looking at the books they read, the people that they listen to. And it's I think it's also embodying the concept and the mindset that information and knowledge and actions and skill sets compound in life, that we don't even know that there's ways that they compound. So I guess it's this, it's school is never out for the pro, and it's always to be learning. It's always to be learning, and it's always to be growing and pushing myself, both mentally and physically, and spiritually, emotionally, relationship wise, and always trying to be better, not for the sake of being better to beat someone else. I mean, obviously there are times and place for competitions, because that makes us all better on some levels, but it's being competitive with yourself of, okay, so I did this yesterday, so how can I even improve on that? So at any given time, I'm trying to acquire several skills, plus I'm also trying to grow relationships, plus I'm also trying to do the things that are non-negotiables that I try to do every single day, to make sure that my initial saw is really sharp. And it's kind of like, it's kind of like the example. Let's say, I mean, I know it's kind of sad, but I guess I'll bring up, in terms of Kobe Bryant, paying tribute to him. Think about, I mean, for him to be really good at what he did, he had to do the same thing every single day over and over again to get to his level. And that was shoot a basketball over and over more times than anyone else, to where ideally he got better than anyone else at shooting that basketball. Obviously basketball is a lot more than just shooting the basket, and he has a lot of other skills, but just to break that down. So ask yourself, what are you doing every single day to keep your vessel ideal? And you need to reduce your decision fatigue, so you have systems set up in your life to where you're doing those non-negotiables every single day. So are you exercising every single day in some form or fashion? Do you have time set aside to work on a skill every single day in some form or fashion? Do you have a time of day to learn some educational thing every single day? Do you have a relationship that you're building and growing every single day? So look at the things in your life that you really want, and then make it so those things happen automatically. And then for me, it's creating this creative time where I have just time to think, where I can let my mind wander, or I can work on projects. So, you have your bundle of time every day that you don't have to think about, that are non-negotiables that you're set, that you're doing regardless. And then you have all the other stuff that tries to constantly erode you from that. So you have to be really solid on that. And by being really solid on that, you can tackle so many other things. So, and then also I think it's practicing the Stoic philosophy. So for me, I've really come to terms with, and I really believe in my core. So you can't just say this is lip service, but in my core, I really believe that if I were to lose everything and everything were to come crashing down, that as long as I had my health and my loved ones, that I would be okay living in a tent in the woods. And that my identity isn't necessarily wrapped up in these other things. Because if you have identity wrapped up in these other things, then you'll start making decisions that aren't necessarily for the right reasons. So I think it's coming to terms with genuinely being okay with living in a tent. And if you're okay with that, then I mean, then there's nothing else that's going to be able to get under your skin. I mean, so I lost my vehicle. Well, my baseline is living in a tent. So if my baseline is living in a tent, like that's not really a big deal. I'm not trying to sugarcoat it and just say we should take all the locks off our doors, but it just depends on where your baseline is. So for me, over the months and years, it's been moving my baseline lower and lower. And when you get your baseline down there, then gosh, I mean, there's not much that can knock you off keel.
It seems like that would make it a lot easier to be grateful every day as well for all those extras. A car.
I mean, I'm grateful for this glass right here. I mean, if I didn't have a glass to drink water out of, I mean, there's so many things all around. I mean, if I lived in a tent, think of how grateful I'd be to have a glass that I could go down to the stream and get water from.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just simple things like that, that the vast majority of the world really doesn't even have. And I don't just say that as a cliche, but it's when you look at, I think the average person who lives off $1 a day, I mean, it's really giving that the credence that it deserves. I mean, that's an extremely powerful thing. And if you can hold that, if you can generally hold that in your consciousness and what that really means, like there's virtually nothing that should knock us off kilter. If you think of, I'm assuming the average person probably listening to this video or this recording, that if you really embody the fact that there's somebody right now that's taking their last breath, or that there's somebody right now that just got diagnosed with irreversible cancer, or there's someone right now that just lost a child, or that they're living on $2 a day and their kid's in the hospital and they don't, like if you really go to those places and get mindful, again, being in control of your thoughts and being mindful, most likely whatever we're dealing with in front of us at the time, it almost becomes comical that we find ourselves so emotionally wrapped up and let ourselves get so bent out of shape with what's directly in front of us at the time, because all we're doing is we're just opening up our eyes to what else is around us and not getting so focused on what's right here, and we're looking at the world in a much broader sense.
Yeah, I've learned the same thing, that without doing that, it's easy to get caught up in the details, the emotional reactions, this happened because of this, and this couldn't happen because of this, and all the egoic stuff
that
life gives us to trip us up and
Well,
help us learn.
and you look at successful people. There's a line by Joe Polish that said, a lot of people think successful people have fewer problems. Well, arguably they have more problems. It's just they have a higher tolerance and a better skill set for dealing with crap. And I look at someone like Elon Musk. So who do I think has more stress in their life, Elon Musk or myself? But I'm not sitting here saying that Elon has a stress-free life, but the idea is that for anyone to deal with Elon, what Elon Musk deals with every day, it's almost impossible to even fathom the decisions that come to him, especially when you consider, and there's an interview that I saw with him, as he said, so think about this, as being CEO of all these companies, you have to consider that only the worst of the worst decisions and problems make it to my desk. Because if it wasn't the worst of the worst, someone else would have already taken care of it. So by default, by being the owner of all these amazing transformational companies, and by being the CEO, he's created this delegation process where only the worst, hardest, most difficult, stressful, all-encompassing problems funnel to him. And so when you think about that, it's like, oh, yeah, the decisions that he's having to make aren't even on, oh, do we go with red or black on this design? It's so much greater than that in terms of what's funneling to him. Otherwise, by default, it wouldn't be funneling to him. So when I think of something like that, it's like, gosh, man, and I see how well poised he is and what he does. And, again, he just has a really high tolerance for dealing with crap. And so I think of myself, I think of observing the observer. So I'm watching myself. I'm thinking of being mindful. So I'm looking at my thoughts and I'm thinking, okay, well, I'm okay living in a tent. So if that's my baseline, everything else is fine. And then on top of that, looking at I kind of do this exercise of what are all these horrible things that could happen or that are going on right now for other people, and how grateful am I that I'm right here, right now, versus in that scenario.
Yeah. Wow. So, okay. If we loop back to some of the health stuff, mindset, super important, but you also specialize in weight loss. I wonder if you could talk real quick on that, and then we'll jump back to some of the other abundant stuff.
Yeah. So weight loss would be the same thing as first you got to get the mindset. And, when you look at 70.9% of people in the US are obese or overweight. So you got to think the vast majority of the population is overweight or obese. And I have yet to meet anyone that was obese that said, gosh, I really love being obese. I rather than I'd like to lose a few pounds. So the thing is that you got to think the state of the average person. So you got to think the consciousness, the state of the average person in the US is unhappy with their physical being, either consciously or unconsciously on some level, most likely. And despite having a near constant daily reminder when they look in the mirror or when they're in the shower and then seeing their body, on some subconscious level, they're reminded almost daily of that they're not happy with their body or where they're at and they want to change. And yet we're not getting there. Yeah. So first thing is recognizing, well, why is that? So first thing is that, because we have more diet books than I think any other country per person. We have more weight loss programs out there, but yet we're failing. And life expectancy actually just dropped, I think, for the last 3 years in a row for the first time essentially ever in the industrialized world. So you got to think that life expectancy was going like this, and it just went like this. It actually didn't plateau; it actually dropped. So if you think that it should have kept going, and it actually, instead of keep growing, it actually curve down, that's actually the gap that we're looking at. So because of where we should be versus where we are, it actually dropped down. So actually the gap is even worse than what we realized. So we have all these indicators, all these things going on. So first off, we need to ask ourselves, so what we're doing clearly is not working. So we need to look at what the masses are doing and do the opposite. The masses are trying to count calories. They're trying to look at books. They're trying to do liposuction, or they're trying to do, I guess I shouldn't say the majority are doing liposuction, of course, but the vast majority try to change what they eat. They try to do this and it just, or that, and it just isn't working. So we need to reframe and redirect what it is that we're working on, or I'm sorry, and how, or what's working, what's not, and how we even frame that. So again, I look at it from the standpoint of, if we get inflammation down and we go after getting the body healthy, then weight loss is a natural consequence. If somebody comes to me and says, I want to lose weight, I'll say, okay, well, I probably can help you with that, but I probably won't take you on as a client. Versus if someone comes to me and says, okay, I want to get as healthy as possible, and I understand this inflammation concept. Dr. Gala, can you help me more or teach me more, or how can we do that? Then I know we're going to win. Because if they're coming, because there's infinite ways to lose weight. I mean, we can lock you in a closet and starve you and you're going to lose weight, but that's not healthy. So if someone has the right mindset about losing weight and that they want to be healthy, we're going to lose weight. I'd say probably 80 to 90% of the people that come to us that want to lose weight do it as a side effect of getting healthy. So we focus on getting people healthy, and as a side effect of getting healthy, they inherently lose weight.
Yeah, and the mindset is a huge piece of that as well. If you have this mindset of just that you're overweight, it's going to be really hard to shift that.
Yeah, well, and it's surrounding yourself with the right playmates and the right playgrounds and the mindsets, because environment is the single biggest predictor of our behavior. Yeah, more than anything else. So just let that land for a second. Environment is the single biggest predictor of human behavior. And if you really embody what that means and you really embrace that, then start going through and taking inventory of what movies you're watching. How many Netflix shows have people binge through? What kind of what do you listen to in your free time? Are you listening to music or are you listening to educational podcasts? I'm not saying one is right or wrong, but I'm just saying is where do you want to go, and what do you want to accomplish in your life? What kind of person do you want to be and become? And then ask yourself, well, who's already there? Who's going there? And how can I be more like them and more like that? And so surrounding yourself with those playmates and those playgrounds, meaning that, the physical space and the people within that physical space, and surrounding yourself in that situation is going to have a long-term compounding effect on your growth as a human.
Yeah. So for the people that might be considering working with you on such things, what might you be able to share of, say, success rates and so forth?
So each patient that comes in that we work with, we define what they think would be success with them. So, if someone comes in and that's 50 years old versus 20 years old, success is going to be defined in two different ways. So really we come in. So the first thing to do is, and that's why I hesitate saying success rate, because I want to be clear in terms of how we define success. Yeah, so when someone comes in, is we define and say, okay, so what would success look like for you? We ask them about their life, what's going on, what's not working well, what do they like, what do they not like, and it's amazing the conversations that come out of that. So, like for instance, one person came in, they said, well, gosh, now that I have, let's just use Parkinson. Well, they had Parkinson's. Another patient had peripheral neuropathy in their feet; they couldn't really walk. So I'll use this one guy for example. He came in and he said, he had really bad neuropathy in his feet, and he looked at me after we went through the whole exam and everything, and he said, "So, do you think you can help me?" I said, "To be really candid with you, you're pretty far along." And I said, "I'll give you a 50-50 chance." I said, if you do all the things that we tell you to do, if you show up X amount of times per week, if you go home and do this work that we're telling you to do, if you make these lifestyle changes, nutrition, diet, supplements, mindset, etc., I think there's a 50-50 chance. And what the 50-50 chance was for him, how he defined success was he wanted to be able to dance with his wife one more time. So that's what I said. I said, look, I'm not going to guarantee, but I said, based on everything that I'm seeing and everything you have going on, I'm thinking that because he could hardly even walk, because his feet were so deformed and so malaligned and had so much neuropathy and so forth. And I said, I'll give you a 50-50 chance. If you're okay with that, then I'd be willing to work with you. And he thought about it for a minute and said, okay, let's do it. We rolled up our sleeves. We worked together. He did all the work. And I remember he came in and on his phone, I remember him walking around in the reception area in one of our clinics, and he was showing a video that someone took on his phone of him dancing with his wife at a wedding. And there wasn't a dry eye in the entire reception area, and all of our front desk gals and guys were, they were all crying and they loved it and everything, because for him that was his big moment of success. So that's how we would define success for him. So for him, that was a success, right? So based on the individual success, I don't have an exact number for it, but I'd say probably 80% to 90% success rate. Because again, we're basing on the individual's goals of how they're defining success. And we're being very clear on that before we launch off. I mean, if someone comes in and they're in their 70s, they want to run a 3-hour marathon, I'd probably say, well, I don't think we're going to hit that, versus if someone's in their 20s or their 30s or 40s or 50s and they want to run a sub 3-hour marathon. So it's all individual. I would say that the people that don't succeed, I would say I can probably count maybe on 2 hands. So maybe a dozen cases in my career of people that I've worked with that I genuinely was left scratching my head. And even a few of those cases now, what I know, if I could go back, I would have done some things differently with them. But the other, let's say 20% of people that we don't hit success with, it's because we weren't able to reach them from a mental aspect, because the science and the tangibles work. It's a problem and a disconnect between us and them of whether we can reach them psychologically to where they'll actually do the work. So it's not that the science doesn't work, it's that they're not doing the work. Yeah. And if I tell somebody, let's just say, if you want to run a sub 3-hour marathon, well, I'm going to tell you, you need to start running and doing these things. Well, if you don't go out and you don't run, you're not going to run a sub 3-hour marathon if you're not training. So to me, it was, okay, so now, how can I go through this? How can I get Jeremy to start running? And he gives me all these objections. Well, I don't have shoes. I don't have time. I'm too tired. There's no place to run. It's too cold. My wife doesn't want me to. I have kids. I have work. It's like, so now, so what's the real reason for him not succeeding? Is it that running doesn't work, or is it that he's not doing the running, or is that there's other things in life? Again, that's the mindset. How do we create the environment to where we can even integrate the running? Yeah. And so if you're not getting the goals that you want in life, you probably are lacking either the structure and the framework, or the actual tangibles that are to be plopped into the structure and the framework. So obviously, if you want to run a sub 3-hour marathon, you have to both know what training you should do, and then you also need to do the training. So I'd say the 20% is, that we don't have success rate. It's because we weren't able to help the person mentally get to the place of where they would consistently implement the stuff that we were telling them to do. Yeah,
great. So let's talk abundance and wealth and another topic of expertise for you. So I'm curious if you could just kind of lay out what would people be interested in and want to learn from you on?
Sure. So on finances, so for me, one of my big core values is really sovereignty and freedom of the individual, and it's creating freedom both in health, actually freedom in life. And I think 2 of the main shackles in life that hold people back are their health and their wealth. And they're either, because you look at in today's society, so many people are unhealthy in some form or fashion, and they're working so much of their life to gain wealth, and they're not really creating wealth, and so but if people have those 2 things, if they have their health and their wealth, that really is what life is all about. Because if you have those two ingredients, you can do everything else that you want in life. But if you're missing either money or your health, you can't do anything. And so the first thing is your health. So you have to get your health straight. Otherwise, you can't work, and you can't produce wealth, and you can't produce value in the world. So the first thing is, of course, my mom, who was very sick when she was young, she didn't have freedom of time or money or purpose, or to be a good mom, because she didn't have her health. So number one, she essentially couldn't function. And she was essentially an invalid, and our family had to take care of her, which we were glad to do because we love mom. And so that's the first power is getting someone's health in order. And if you don't have that in order, getting wealth is going to be difficult, or you're not going to attain it as much as you can. So getting healthy is number one. And then the thing is all the doctors that my mom went to, expert after expert, they all told her the same thing. Sorry, we don't know what's wrong with you, but you're going to be spending the rest of your life in a wheelchair. And that was, and so here's all these experts telling her basically the same status quo crap. Sorry, you're going to be sick the rest of your life. Have a nice life. Well, if she had listened to that, where would she be now? Well, probably still, she'd probably be in a wheelchair, or she'd probably be dead. Yeah. She certainly wouldn't be running and winning 5K races like she does now. So the other thing is wealth. I remember once our clinics finally started getting successful, because we actually launched one of our first clinics in 2009. So on the heels of the recession, a lot of my colleagues were going bankrupt, and I was opening up a clinic that we didn't even have enough money to cover our monthly cash flow needs, to even cover our rent and the mortgage on the new clinic that we built. So the first couple of years of our clinic were very lean, but it was a passion that I really wanted to serve people and help. So we kept forging ahead. There was many times where the thought of just walking away from it all, and the stressful, sleepless nights and the 12 to 14-hour work days did not seem inviting. And I asked myself, why am I doing this? Why don't I just go live in Mexico and live in a tent? But I didn't do that, and I kept pushing forward. And then when we actually started to become profitable, in our clinics, I realized, so wait a minute. So I'm doing all this work, and I remember kind of a pivotal moment. I was talking to my CPA, and he said, "Okay, yeah. So here's what you owe in taxes this year." And I looked at what I owed in taxes, and I looked at what I had in the bank account, and I said, "How is it possible that I owe more in taxes than what I have in the bank account?" I said, "I feel like I'm busting my butt. I'm doing all this work." And he's like, "Yeah," and he kind of chuckled and said, "Yeah, a lot of people think that." I said, well, this isn't funny. Like, where am I going to get this money from? Like, I literally don't have the money. And this was a time where our business where I thought I was putting 80 to 90% of our money back into the business just to cover, because like I said, like we weren't even profitable. So, and I'm thinking, how is this working? That clicked for me. And so since then I've been on a second quest, and that was how to keep more money. So I remember writing a check to the IRS for how much, what you could buy a nice house for. And I'm thinking, well, how much better would this be for either giving this to our team members, or creating more jobs, or putting it back into the business, or growing the business, or helping patients, all the other things that we do now. I mean, we sponsor, well, I don't need to go into it, but we do a lot of philanthropic work as well now. So essentially what we've done is we've found a strategy and approach that thousands and tens of thousands of other businesses use every year to reduce their tax liability to about 2 to 4%. So we've created essentially a model where members can become essentially part of a co-op model, where we utilize a strategy, and they can essentially get the same tax effective rate as being in the group as everyone else. So by being a member of the group, you essentially get your tax rate down to 1.75%. So, I mean, people see in the news, they say, "Oh, Amazon didn't pay any taxes," and they get angry and say, "Oh, Amazon should pay more taxes." Well, I say, well, why don't you figure out how Amazon's doing that, and why don't you do that and pay less taxes? I mean, really, because are you really upset that Amazon is paying less in taxes, or are you upset that you're paying in taxes and they're not? So, and I think that's really the crux, because if John across the street, your neighbors came to you and said, "Oh my gosh, man, I found this great tax attorney, and he was able to reduce my taxes to zero, or about 1 to 2% compliantly, legally, everything, all this stuff." Would you say, "Gosh, John, you're an idiot. You need to pay more taxes"? Or would you be asking for his accountant? You'd be saying, "Hey, John, we've been neighbors for a while. Do you think I can get your accountant's number?" I mean, you'd be doing the latter, right? You wouldn't go to your spouse and grumble and say, "Gosh, that John, he doesn't pay any taxes. Gosh, he's just as bad as Amazon. He needs to pay more taxes, and he needs to quit finding all these government loopholes." You'd say, "Hey, honey, John knows something that we don't know. I think we should invite them over for dinner, and let's figure out what they're doing and talk to a CPA." I mean, almost anyone in their right mind would do the latter, right?
Yeah.
But for some reason, when we look at Amazon and we think this big corporation, we think, "Boo, down with them.
Yeah.
They need to pay more taxes. How can they be so criminal?" It's like, well, no, they just hired the best people that have figured out all of the legitimate and legal tax laws to maximize it. And that's what tens of thousands of businesses do every year. So we've just created a model to take all the guesswork out of it, so that people can do that themselves without having to get all, without having to go through all the gnashing of teeth and hair pulling of trying to figure it out on their own. We do that for people. So essentially they become a member, and they get and by becoming a member, they reduce their taxes to around 2%. Or 1.75%.
Wow. So this is a program that you offer.
Yeah. So we use a technique. It's called cash flow liquidity arbitrage. It's a mouthful. But when you understand it and you understand the numbers, you realize what all of these other businesses are doing to reduce compliantly their taxes each and every year. And so for me, I haven't paid taxes for, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 years now, which comes with a lot of other benefits, because obviously now you get that money you can put back into your business. So now we're offering, now we offer retirement programs for our team. We have more health improvements. We can expand our clinics, our vision. So obviously, having more money usually helps.
An argument I've heard some people bring up is, but what about the schools and the roads? Those need paid for too.
Yeah, well, I think that's I think that's a wonderful example. So I would kindly suggest that those people that ask about schools and roads, that I would encourage them to research more about excise taxes versus income taxes. So there's different types of taxes that we have. So for instance, there's taxes everywhere. So for instance, on our business, just on our business, for instance, the county that our businesses are in, we have to pay taxes on every single piece of equipment that we own. Now that means every pencil that we have, every paper cup, every chair in our reception room, every year we have to pay a tax on that to the county. I don't think people realize that. So every year as a business, regardless of whether we're profitable or not, we have to pay to the local county. We have to pay taxes every year on how many paper cups we have that are sitting at the water dispenser. We pay a tax on that. So we pay a tax on that. We also pay property taxes. When we buy gas, we pay, there's a gas tax that's already woven into the gas tax that goes for roads. There's property taxes that go to fund schools. There's bonds that are done for other community projects. There's, on your phone bill, you have a tax that usually goes to 911 coverage. So when you look at all these things, usually most of these things are actually already covered by taxes you're already paying. So when people say, well, what the heck is my income tax going to? That's a good question. That's what people need to be researching and looking into, because income tax versus excise tax they're two completely different things. I'm all for excise taxes, but I'm not for income taxes. I'm for taxes that people can choose to opt out of, because taxation is really it's a taking of someone's life and their time, and all we really have in life is time. Our clock starts ticking from day one. So when someone is taxed, the average person, if they're making over $200,000 a year, they're paying about 20 to 30% in taxes. Let's just say a normal 30% tax bracket. So the average person is working. You got to think January, February, March, and April. Every year, they're working the first 4 months of their life. They're waking up every day and going to work just to make enough money to pay the government to go spend it on whatever they want. Whether it's, Trump's next golf course or his next golf outing. It's going to, and obviously this is where people could get political with it, but I think a lot of interventionism, all of our military bases all over the world. I think that our defense budget, I think, is more of an offense budget that's been overinflated. I think there's a lot of waste in government. So you can get into a lot of particulars of it, but I think there's a lot of waste in income taxes at the government level. So I'd much rather help businesses figure out how they can keep more of their money, because I know that someone like you, if I can help you reduce your taxes and give you your life back, give you those first 3 months back every year of your life. I'm giving you 3 months of your life every single year. Now times that by the next 20 years, that's 60 months. So I've just given you 5 years of your life back.
Yeah.
This is real numbers. Like I've literally given you 5 years of, you could just as assume take 3 months off every year doing whatever you want, traveling the world. And that's essentially the gift that I've just given you. And you could do that for the rest of your life by becoming a member.
Yeah. Wow.
So when you look at the freedom that gives people and the good that they can do in the world, it opens up so much more. And then they can turn around and then they can spend it on, let's say they want to go travel and they want to buy a gallon of gas for their car and they drive somewhere. Now they're paying into the excise taxes, and now they're paying those taxes.
So you don't have to be a big corporation to save that much money on taxes. It's accessible to all of us if we know where to go and who to talk to.
You just need to surround yourself with the right people, the right environment, and the right people, which is why the people that are watching this right now, just the very fact that people took the time and the decision to watch this right now, I applaud them, because you're not watching Netflix right now. You're watching this to improve yourself, to educate yourself, and because information compounds and information grows exponentially, even just listening to this and watching this video or this recording is going to improve you as a human on some level. And it's part of your financial education. So yeah, it's surrounding yourself with people that have been down that road before. They know what they're doing, and the mindset and the tangibles of how to do that. So you don't have to be a big corporation. You just have to have the idea that you want to reduce taxes, save more of your life, not work the first 3 or 4 months every year indiscriminately for the government because you already pay so many other taxes. And you know what? If you really want to do well in the world, keep that money and then just go donate it back to the government. If you really want to, then just write the check to the government and just say, okay, you know what? I saved $100,000 in taxes. I'm going to give you $75,000, and just go write a check and just go give it to the IRS and just deposit it if it's that important to you.
Again, it's back to mindset, doing it out of choice rather than feeling like a victim and having to pay all this to taxes.
Or look in terms of how you can do goodwill in the world. Because all of us help our neighbors. Every single one of us, I know that every one of us at some time or another has helped someone else in our lives. And that's really the essence of it, is that it's the collaborative forces at play in the marketplace. Because when I go to the shop to get my work done on my vehicle by the mechanic, like I want him to do well. Like I want him to succeed. Like I want to be able to come back next time, and I want him to have better tools, better equipment, so he can do even better work on my car, because I'm only going to win. And when my car's not breaking down and I can have the best mechanic, then I can get to work and I can provide value to other people who then pay me, that I can turn around and pay. So I don't think people realize the true power of the collaboration that's unspoken in the marketplace, that we all want the other person to win and do well, because now that mechanic, when he hurts his back, he's going to come into one of our clinics. And I want to be on a good relationship with him because I'm representing our business, and that's just what you do to be a good human, because you want to help him out and you want him to win. So now when he needs help, he's going to come to us, and vice versa. So there's a huge incentive at play to be collaborative in the marketplace when you remove the government, because when you look at governmental agencies, they don't have any true incentive to improve the customer experience, because at the end of the day, I mean, you can only go to the DMV to get your license. I mean, you don't have any other option. But if this guy's being a jerk, or if I'm being a jerk, you can choose to not come to our clinic, or I can choose to not go to his mechanic shop. So they're deeply incentivized to really collaborate in the marketplace, charge fair prices, provide excellent value, a great customer experience, et cetera. So, but the government doesn't have any of those qualifications or any of those requirements to qualify to be at the DMV.
Yeah. So you help people with death and taxes. Where does the death part come in?
So that would be our health aspect, right? So when we had people, so we did a longevity summit. We had like 200 people there. And we had a gal on stage that we were interviewing her, and she said she literally was in the ICU, and the doctor said that she didn't have much time left, and she basically grabbed the manual that we had given her, her book, her healthy living guide that we give all of our clients. So she had this book, and she said she gave it to the nurses, and she said, you need to follow this for me to get healthy. And they read through it, and they started doing those things and incorporating that in her day-to-day life. And the nurses, in her words, she said, the nurses, when I left, they were blown away, because none of the nurses thought I was ever going to walk out of there. I was so sick. I was so bad, because she came to us when she was already really sick, and she was on her way to going to the ICU. So we had her, I think we were working with her for maybe a week or two, and she was so excited learning about this stuff. Then when she went to the ICU, she had just started all of this stuff that we were teaching her. So she started incorporating it when she was in the ICU. And she said that when she walked out, the nurses said, we never thought you'd walk out. And she used the word miraculous, that she was able to recover. So that would be an example of what I would say is literally saving someone from dying by utilizing this framework. I look at people that have improved balance, so it reduces their fall risk, because if you fall and you're over the age of 60, you have a 19% chance of dying in 12 months. So we look at just reducing fall risk. That improves life and life expectancy. Some of the other techniques that we have in terms of reducing inflammation and improving overall health adds, on paper, we can show that we're adding 5 to 20 years to people's lives, but by some of the data that we're able to produce with the health changes. So death and taxes, I think, adding 20 years to someone's life That's pretty good in terms of avoiding taxes or death. And those are people that are usually in their 50s or 60s that come to us. That's not even people in their 20s or 30s. If people in their 20s and 30s that integrate this, I mean, I think realistically with 3D printing of organs and stem cells, I mean, I think the first person to live to 1,000 is alive today. But if they really embrace this when they're young. So I think adding that, and then also when you look at taxes portion, the fact that you work the first 3 to 4 months of your life every year just to pay taxes, the fact that I'm giving people back 3 months every year of their life. I mean, it's like that scene in The Princess Bride, right? Where the guy like is on that machine down in the dungeon, and he's like, I just sucked 5 years of your life from you, kind of thing. How does that feel? And it's like we have like the opposite of that, right? Like we're re-injecting 5 to 10 years of people's lives.
Yeah, that's so powerful. It's such a gift. Yeah, our health. So I was told when I was 16 that I'd probably never walk again. And part of my mind, I noticed at one point, I thought it was going to be fine when I first got up onto crutches. They were going to, with physical therapy, help me learn how to start walking with those. And I just remember something in my mind was like, no way. There's no way
Right.
I wouldn't be able to walk. Forget that. I'm doing this. And I got up thinking, my legs are still strong. I'll still be able to stand up.
Yeah.
I got up, had my weight on the crutches, and then I took the weight off the crutches, and my legs were jello. There was I was like, what is this? But over time, I built up the strength, and I was able to walk again. I ended up in the military after that.
Wow. And
So
and what was the main cause?
I was hit by a drunk driver and broke my pelvis in 4 places, and then I got staph infection on top of that. So.
Wow. Geez. Well, my hat goes off to you for where you're at now. That's amazing.
Yeah, thanks. It's definitely been a journey.
Yeah, I can only imagine. What do you think was the biggest mindset challenge for you that you were able to overcome?
I feel like one of the biggest gifts for me was that it gave me a chance to take a step back from life that most other people don't get, and just kind of be the observer.
Yeah.
I feel like that was such a different perspective, that I've been able to see everything in life from more of that less fear of death,
Yeah.
less emotional reactivity, kind of similar like what you're saying of taking that other perspective and just observing. I don't know for sure if that's just my nature or if it was because of that, but I feel
Yeah.
lucky that I've been able to just step back like, okay, I'm not dead yet, so I must be meant to be here. Okay, so how can I maximize and make the best of it?
That's awesome. That's tremendous. I love that.
Yeah. And
Good
so
for
I
you.
guess similar to you, it seems like you've done a lot of mindset work that I got into learning more and more about the self-development and how to have a better mindset. I've learned and listened and studied a ton of self-help stuff,
Yeah.
and feel that that's, I don't know, given me a huge step up compared to most people I've been around. That I always have this like a greater, more expanded knowing and awareness of why something will or won't work, and
Yeah.
how to kind of accommodate for it. So
Yeah.
I
That's
think
that's gosh, I think that's one of the best skills that if we can cultivate that within ourselves, it's huge.
gratitude and positivity, knowing
Yeah.
that hey, I'm still alive. That's, there's something there. Like why?
Right.
Because I was so close to death. They didn't take me in life flight because they thought that, well, they didn't have the equipment for. I was so close to death. They didn't have what they needed to support me there, so they took me by
Wow.
ambulance, police escort, got me clear across town where it normally would have been at least a half-hour drive. Got me there in 11 minutes.
Jeez.
Yeah, I'm not sure how they did that on a Friday night, but
Wow.
there were a lot of miraculous results that I knew was too miraculous to be accidental.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I
Well,
felt like
I'm glad that you're walking. What military did you get into?
I went into the army.
Okay.
Yeah, I
Wow.
went through boot camp. I did all the training, and yeah.
Yeah, well, my hat goes off to you. That's a tremendous story. It's inspiring and just shows how powerful the yeah, kind of everything that we're saying. It's great.
I've got bolts and plates and screws in my hips, and they still let me in. They said normally they don't let anyone in with more than one screw without getting a waiver first. The doctor, when I went to sign up, was blown away. He looked at my X-ray. He's like, "I've never seen anything like this. I don't know what to do with this."
Oh wow.
He went and talked to somebody and came back, and he's like, "Well, if you think you can run and jump and do everything everyone else can do, I don't see any reason to let some rule keep you out." So he signed the paperwork, and I'm just like, wow, how did this just happen? I don't know. So I'm just gonna go check out what jobs are available.
And how are you now?
I'm great. I feel that there could be some deeper systemic levels of inflammation and stuff going on, and I'm wanting to dig deeper on that and find out what I can do to resolve that. And I've wondered if the hardware of my hips have caused some blockages in the energy meridians. Some of the stuff that a typical allopathic doctor wouldn't have a clue. They would either just like want to do surgery or give me some drugs or something to kind of cover up the symptoms. But I want to go deeper. I want to like really get into how to resolve it at that deeper level.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
that's great. That's a great awareness.
Yeah. Yeah. I've learned enough to know not to just let them do whatever. My orthopedic doctor at the time said that if I ever want, he said I should never need to have the hardware taken out, but if I ever want to, I can totally go back and do that.
Yeah.
I just thought, well, I've noticed when I don't exercise that the inflammation starts to build up, and my body, I get more aches and pains, and I don't want to move, and I realized when and I think this is one of the gifts of being in the military is that I had to do the exercise.
Right.
When I did and I got used to it, my body felt better. And I noticed that the aches and pains went away. I mean, there were still some, but not the deep chronic ones.
Yeah.
And so I've not had chronic issues with my back or my hips or my legs or any of that unless I stop exercising.
Yeah.
And so I've noticed that that's a pretty valuable insight for anyone that's got weight issues, chronic pain issues, and I know that those are different for different people. But I've learned enough to know that exercise gives us our body the movement, and so it moves our lymph system. It moves the fluids in our body that wouldn't be moved any other way, and that's a very valuable, super valuable piece of our health that isn't typically included in regular medicine. They say exercise, but they don't say why exactly to that level, right?
Yep. Well, what's the phrase? If exercise could be put in a pill form, it'd be the most prescribed medication out there.
For sure. Yeah.
because it'd be the most prescribed for the most conditions because it helps with everything on so many levels. But actually, believe it or not, exercise is not one of the first things that we actually encourage people to do, because so many people typically have a resistance mentally against it. So usually we don't do that. We help people start getting wins elsewhere, and then once they start getting some wins under the belt, then we see about adding in exercise or those other things.
For sure, I've noticed that there's like a trajectory, and if you don't have the mindset and you try to start exercising, you're going to find resistance and you're going to do it for a certain amount of time and then just stop.
Yep.
But if you could start creating wins in other ways to where you start caring enough about yourself to where you feel like, oh, I want to exercise, then you can do that and stick with it and keep building on that and on that trajectory of wins. And it sounds like that's what you're doing. Yeah.
Yep.
Because the mindset, it doesn't shift with a pill. It takes gradual wins.
No, it doesn't. I mean, there has to be an awareness or a perspective that you want something. Well, I mean, again, it's going back to the concept of reverse engineering it to where you see what you want and then recognize, are my behaviors and actions getting me to where I want, or is it not? And just keep a simple example of a very tangible example would be that if you want to become a marathon runner, you have to run, and no one can do the miles for you. Like no one cannot go out and run the miles for you in training. You have to go out and do the miles. And then just being really honest with the idea of, am I, being very honest with the idea that I'm doing the miles or I'm not doing the miles, rather than saying, oh, I'm too busy, I'm too busy, and I'm not going to run today. Well, that's fine, but recognize that for what it is.
Yeah.
Don't say that running doesn't work. Say that your lifestyle doesn't work, and then that way you can address that. So and again, I think if you're observing the observer and you're able to step outside yourself, you can stand back and you can more objectively look at what's really taking place that's preventing or inhibiting you from reaching a certain goal. And then you need to have that genuine conversation with yourself of, okay, so how do I switch this? And I think a lot of times, we say, oh gosh, well, we go to our friend or a family member and say, gosh, thank you so much for listening and helping me talk this out. I feel so much better now. I mean, almost all of us can think of a time where we went to a friend or loved one and said, gosh, I feel so much better after talking with you. Well, it oftentimes can be what they said, but it's often almost equally as though when you have to talk with someone about an idea or concept or something that's running around in your hamster wheel, what we find is that when we have to tell someone about it, it forces us to put things in a sequential order, and it robs us of the ability to leapfrog around in our brain when we're left to our own devices. Yeah. Because it's kind of like, have you ever been deep in thought and someone said, oh, what are you thinking? And you pause and you think, well, I just leapfrogged about 10 different things there all in like a fraction of a second, and if I have to explain it to you, it's probably going to take me 10 minutes. But taking those 10 minutes will help you from leapfrogging and getting lost in the labyrinth in our brain. So very often, the very act of talking it through with somebody is not necessarily as much of the feedback they're giving you, but it's forcing you to put things in a logical sequential format. And then by the time you're done talking and sharing what the problem was or the hurdle is, whatever it is, it's not uncommon that then when you have it laid out in front of you, you're in essence looking at it like a coach right now, watching a football player or a sport player, and saying, oh, well, then if this is what this is the landscape, then this is what we need to do. And you can oftentimes see the solution yourself. So oftentimes by doing that, we come up with the solution ourselves. And then our friend more or less can reaffirm that to us, or maybe give a little bit of additional outside influence. So there's a way you can do this by yourself without necessarily needing to have someone there. But most people aren't willing to do it. And it's simply getting a piece of paper and forcing yourself to write down and pretend you're explaining to somebody. A lot of people don't like pretending. They don't like, acting things out or role playing with themselves, but just going to almost like a journaling effect, but really just asking yourself, okay, so what's the problem? Write down the problem. I can't run a marathon. Okay. What do I want to do? I want to run a marathon. Okay. So let's look at what do I want? I want to run a marathon. What do I have and what do I know? Well, I know that I have this much time every day. I have, shoes. I have all this equipment to run. I have the mindset to run. I don't have a trainer to help train me to run. I have a good place to run. You go through all the things that it's going to take for you to get there. And then by the time you do that, then you can say, okay, well, what am I willing to change, or what do I need to change or give up in my life to meet all of those criteria? And you can do it yourself. Oh, well, I need to find a coach. Okay, well, what's the next step? And I always found that when you're making to-do lists, don't just put down get a running coach. What you'd want to put down is the very next step that's actionable. So it would be when I'm done with this exercise, go to my computer and research 5 coaches and send them an email. So have a really specific action step, because you can't just say, get a running coach. Like that's too big. Like you need to know what your very next action step is. It's okay. So, do it, talk to John, our neighbor, who's also a runner, and ask who his coach is. Look online at the local running club and ask who their coaches are. And so create an action step. So maybe in this scenario, it'd be, okay, I need to, well, now I realize that I'm making my lunches in the morning. So I need to make my lunches in the evening before I go to bed. So I have more time in the morning. So, okay, so make lunches when I'm cleaning up for dinner, make my lunches for the next day then. Send an email to 3 people for a running coach. This Saturday morning when I wake up, go to the store and get fitted for some running, so it's going through in a very tangible sequential order, but very few people would do that. Unfortunately, too many people would rather come home and default to watching Netflix and, or Facebook or social media rather than do something that really adds a depth of value to their life where they really ultimately want to go, but they're not really having that conversation at that level of what it's going to take to actually get there, or to have that difficult conversation. And that's another thing I think a lot of people don't fully hit. And I think it's a Tim Ferriss line that says, typically the success in someone's life can be measured by the number of difficult conversations they've been willing to have. And I think of almost all of us right now, if we think there's probably someone in our life right now who we need to have a difficult conversation with, and that we haven't been having that conversation. And I know for me, there's people in my life right now that I know that there's a difficult conversation that I need to have that I haven't been having. And if you look deep enough, there's usually almost all of us have something in the basement right now of someone that we probably should or could or can be having a difficult conversation with that we're avoiding because of the short term, but that would be so much more beneficial to us in the long run.
For sure. Wow. Yeah, for sure. Eat the frog.
That's right. First thing in the morning, do it. Get it done. Eat that frog.
Wow. So this summit has been called the Inspired Change Summit, and it's geared around people waking up or in some part of their journey of awakening. And I'm curious to ask what thoughts or wisdom you might have around that. It seems like you've already talked about some really great stuff.
So I would say just look at what the masses are doing and do the opposite.
Yeah.
Look at what conventional wisdom tells us and do the opposite. And probably 9 times out of 10, you're going to be spot on and have a better life, more abundance. You're just going to have so much more. You're going to have so much more in your life if you look at someone like Amazon and rather than try to drag them down by not paying less taxes, ask not how do we get Amazon to pay more taxes, but ask, well, how can I reduce my taxes? So it's rephrasing the question because it's not a zero-sum game. It's a 1 + 1 = 3 here. It's not a 1 + 1 = 1, which I think is a lot of what people think. People think like, oh, well, Amazon's reducing their taxes, so I can't reduce my taxes. It's like, well, no, like look at it from a strategic perspective and from abundance, and really say, what things in my life do I not like, and that I have these anchorings to that aren't serving me. I mean, like when my vehicle got stolen, it's like, well, if I were to be attached to that, then like how is that serving me? Like if I were to spend the rest of my day being worked up and anxious and all that, like that's going to provide zero value to my life and those that are in it.
Yeah. And
so it's being really clear on what kind of life you want to live, what kind of mindset do you want to live in, because really at any given time, because think about this. Let's say that I did get really upset when my vehicle was stolen. So there was a time that I wouldn't have been upset. Like I would get over it, right? So really it's just the time from when an incident happens to there's an arbitrary timeline to where it won't bother you anymore. So if it's an arbitrary timeline to begin with, why don't we just compress time and make it a second or two? I mean, sure, the car gets stolen, and if you want to get upset, like let yourself get upset for a second and then just don't. And a lot of people say, oh, well, that's just easy. How do you say that? Well, it's a muscle just like anything else. If people want to run a marathon, just maybe because I think this is such a relevant point, it's like, well, you start running. Well, I don't know how to run. Well, you start by, putting one foot in front of the other. Well, I can't even get out of a chair. Okay, well then start by standing up out of your chair and sitting back down and doing that 10 times. So like no one was born being able to run a marathon. Every single person that ran a marathon at day 1, they could not run a marathon, but they've done the steps to run a marathon. And so now they could go out and, if someone ran a marathon today, most likely a month from now, they probably could run a marathon again, but they've developed that muscle. So if someone says, oh, well, how do you not get angry at your partner, at your spouse, at life circumstances, someone cuts you off in traffic, all these things. It's like, well, there's people that just like there's people that run marathons, there's people that don't have that mindset. So think of your brain just like a muscle. If you were to run every day for a year, if you were to put in, let's say you were to run an hour every day for a year, we all would agree that you'd be better at running after a year, most likely barring injuries and unforeseens. Well, what if you spend an hour every single day working on your brain and how you respond to emotions and you respond to situations? Do you think that it's possible that you'll be better and more equipped at responding to different situations a year from now? Treat it just like a muscle. And so, I mean, just like you're a perfect example. I mean, you got hit by a drunk driver. You couldn't use your legs. You couldn't function. But when you're telling me this story, I mean, you're smiling and almost laughing as you recount through it. And you're joking about how the doctor said, I've never, if you have more than one screw, you can't get in. And you're laughing about it versus when it happened, you probably weren't too happy, understandably so. And I'm not saying that we should just blunt all pain responses and just mask all of it.
Never much of it.
Right. But you could have been completely on the other side, the poor is me, woe is me, but you didn't, you decided otherwise. So I would say that there really is always an option in terms of how we feel. And in the words of Sam Harris, I love his line. It says, if you're suffering, it's because you're lost in thought. And that goes for just about anything. If you're arguing or if you're emotionally upset or frustrated, it's because you're lost in thought. And you're demonstrating to yourself that you don't have control over your body and your mind.
I was just listening to another TED Talk that talked about when we get caught up in the resistance of whatever the reaction is, and we don't allow ourselves to fully feel it, and we just like push it down, it stores in our energy body. But when we do embrace it, it lasts 60, maybe 90 seconds at the most.
Yeah.
And, can we just handle it? Can we just deal with it for a minute to a minute and a half and just like allow the body to process it and be done and not store it for later?
Yeah. Well, there's a great step in the 12-step program with AA, and also spinoffs of that as well. But one of them is and I forget, the line is escaping me entirely, but it's like taking I think it's like a deep moral inventory. Maybe I can find out what we're talking here. But it's let's see here. So it's the idea of taking a fearless moral inventory or taking a moral inventory and then and really taking an honest look at the good and bad character traits of everything.
Uh-huh.
And really looking at that and then also looking at it and I think it's one of the later steps, but it's making amends.
Uh-huh. Forgiveness.
Yeah, so it's making amends, and I think it's such a good line here. Let me see if I can figure out what the step is here. Okay, made direct amends to such people wherever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. So here's the thing. So step number 8. So number 4 is made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. And then skipping ahead, number 8, made a list of all the people we have harmed and became willing to make amends to all of them. And that would include ourselves. I mean, think of the things that we've done to ourselves, the emotional abuse that we give ourselves that we need to take inventory of. And now let's take that and say, now making direct amends to such people whenever possible or wherever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. So doing that exercise, gosh, I mean, it was so impactful for ourselves and for others. So I think if someone can really own that and really get on that and go through that with, I'm not saying a completely stoic response because you want to be human and genuine, but you don't have to punish yourself in this exercise.
Yeah. No, that's a super important step in pretty much any healing, being able to forgive others as well as yourself, because otherwise you're holding on to that hurt, that pain.
Oh yeah. Well, I remember some conversations that I've had in my life. One was, I didn't have a relationship with my dad for, what was it? 10 years. And I was expecting him to change.
Uh-huh.
And I realized that he wasn't going to change.
Yeah.
And I remember just saying, you know what, I really would like to have a relationship with my dad. And there's so many things that I felt I had been wronged on. and that probably, if I shared some things that went on, probably 9 out of 10 people would say, gosh, Thaddeus, you were completely justified in the way that you felt and thought. And especially for the age that it happened and the things surrounding it. And it wasn't until I came to a time where I said, okay, I'm gonna accept my dad, my father, for who he is and where he is. And I did some other mental exercises as well. But then I got through to the point of where, and I wasn't a victim, and I don't believe that I compromised on what was important to me, and I believe that I'm also firm in terms of my boundaries and protecting myself. But when you take all those pieces together and the subtleties of all those and you add them up, the sum is that you get this dynamic that works, that I have, I believe, a healthy, happy relationship with my father that's been restored. And I believe it's much healthier for myself.
Yeah.
I don't feel like I'm building regrets like I was.
Mm-hmm.
And so many other things that we've been able to experience as a result of that, that I had been harboring that I didn't realize. So when you say you're harboring stuff, we get pretty deep into some other things here, but it's, realizing that everyone is doing the best they can with what they have when they have it.
Yeah.
And that we're all a product of our environment and our genetics, and that we're not necessarily who we are by our own choosing, but rather by the turns in the path that have been laid in front of us. And again, like I mentioned earlier, I don't believe that there's such thing as free will. So I believe that those turns of the path have already been decided for us. So you look at where someone is in life. Really, I don't believe we have any other option other than really to approach it with compassion and kindness and patience. Now, of course, I think there's a time and place if somebody is a risk to the general public and population that they need to be sequestered, whether that's prison or something else. I don't think prison is set up a way to really help people heal, but I think a sequestration from public is good, but that doesn't mean that we need to be punitive or retributive. The words escape me. I'm having a brain jumble right now, but
Punishing.
But we don't need to be punitive in how we respond in those circumstances. We can still be humane, and we can still be. I think it was the Dalai Lama. He was asked. He said, if you were given the option to basically kill baby Hitler, would you do it? And I don't know. This is from a second, third-hand source. So I don't know if the Dalai Lama actually said this, but he said he thought about it and said, he said, okay, yes, I would, but I would do so with reverence and respect because it's still a human life, or something along those lines. And, then the follow-up natural question, I think would be then like, okay, so at what age is it okay to kill Hitler? When he's like first born, a month, or is it when he's a teenager? Or is it better to, sterilize his mom and his dad before it ever happened? Or is it better to even go back and, kill his mom and dad so that never even came into fruition? I don't know. But that's when you get into the moral philosophy of if you believe that would have been a positive trade-off, you can go down a whole philosophical perspective of when and where and how we intervene.
I think we think a lot alike, and we can get very philosophical. Along with the verbal processing.
Yeah.
It helps to talk things through sometimes. I a lot of times don't know my thought very clearly until I'm speaking it, and then, that, okay.
Right,
what I said.
right. Yep.
Wow. Okay, well, I think we could probably wrap it up. Is there any other topics that we should cover?
I'm sure there probably is, and I'm sure we could probably go all day, but yeah, I think that was a lot. I'm sure that was good for now.
Oh, there's a lot in there for sure. Awesome. Well, thank you so much. Oh, and I was thinking, I actually met your dad, and he's actually seems like a pretty cool guy.
Okay, awesome, very cool. Yeah, he is a cool guy.
So, anyway,
I'm curious if you don't mind me sharing, where did you meet my dad?
At the house. We stopped by on the way through with Rebecca.
Oh, okay. And he came through. Oh, wonderful. Very cool.
Yep.
Yeah. So look at that. So you wouldn't have had that exposure if I hadn't made reconciliation and hadn't made if we hadn't come to terms.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I, and that's great. A great idea for anyone that has any issues between their parents, either mom
Yeah.
or father,
Yeah.
um, to resolve that, because the parents are doing the best they know how as well. And sometimes it takes a kid,
Everyone is.
yeah, it takes one of the kids to speak up and shift
Yeah.
that dynamic.
Especially when we realize, typically as we get older, we get less creative and open to new ideas. I think, gosh, I think there's something shown that Einstein, like he had some great advances, but then like after a certain age, he really didn't have too many like breakthrough advances. And I think when you look at like some of the great, like really like just mind shifting like type things, a lot of them I think happened when people were younger. Now, not that they can't go on and continue their life's work and do huge impactful things, but like, but when you look at the major shift, it was at a younger age, and then they pursued deeper in that shift, if you will. So it's like, oh, it had this shift, and then like the theory of relativity, and then would dive deep into that over the rest of the lifetime. So I think as we get older, I think I think two things. One is we need to maintain the plasticity in being open to new ideas, and also having patience for those people that are older than us, that not only do they have a lot of wisdom to share with us, but also having patience that they're probably going to be less likely to make a shift or a switch from their worldview.
Yeah, for sure. Interesting. Huh. Any tips or tricks on how to do that in middle age?
I think really understanding human psychology,
Uh-huh.
and really going through that, because when you understand psychology, the more, so when I was young, when I first learned about physics in school, I thought, okay, so for every action there's an equal and opposite reaction. So okay, so that means that everything in motion is already in motion, and that everything that's going to happen is already going to happen. Like the pool balls of life on the quantum level are already in action. So then, yeah, then if we could freeze time and we knew the vectors, we knew the speed, the mass of everything in motion, then in essence, we could take those building blocks and we know exactly how an organism is going to work. Pool balls on a table are no different than a human if you had infinite calculating abilities. So to me, understanding human psychology is the hack, if you will, to understand how the human pool balls are going to interact without having to go down and look at every single atom. You can look at it from a higher level, and you understand, basically the hardness of the pool ball, the mass of the pool ball, how it's going to interact when forces are applied to it. And a human is no different. If you understand the human psychology, and it opens up the whole world of ourselves and understanding how people work. And so as I got older, I really was the belief of, gosh, well, everyone's doing the best they can with what they have when they have it. So it's no real fault of their own. And then obviously you get the whole conversation of culpability, but rather you can have compassion for people and where they're at and what they're doing, because they're really a product of their past and their environment, as they're essentially, as we're all passengers watching our lives unfold in front of us, um, and recognizing that we're passengers, we're not a driver of it. Um, and even as I'm doing that, I'm realizing that I'm forgetting the initial thought of the initial point of what I was going to be making with that. Where did I start with that? Do you remember? If you don't, maybe it'll come to me. But so anyways, when I was really young, I recognized that, and then as I got into human psychology, when you asked about, oh yeah, that's right, strategies for as people get older. So I've already done a couple interviews today, so you have to forgive my synapses myself are starting to wear down on energy on the inside there. So when you understand the human psychology of it, you can get a better insight into yourself in terms of how you do things, the way you do them, and why. And plus, you can also really understand, if you give a certain input into the system, how that person is going to most likely respond or react. And then you also understand why people are reacting. Like, how many times have you heard people say, gosh, I can't believe so and so did that, or gosh, I can't believe they think that way, or gosh, I like, how does that make sense to them?
Yeah.
Anytime you say that, it's because you don't understand human psychology, myself included. And when you start looking at, there's actually a great place people can go to. If you go to like cognitive biases and you look that up on Wikipedia, they have a whole like brain dump map of all the different like studies that have been done, and they give examples, and it's cool. It's fascinating just to click through some of the different studies on there, or just do a search online, put the top 25 psychological studies and what it tells us. And the insights that you'll get from that are absolutely amazing in terms of how we process and how we really aren't governing our own thoughts, and we aren't governing our own actions.
Wow. Huh.
And any marketer knows this already. Anyone in marketing already knows that free will doesn't exist.
Interesting. So the Facebook engineers that are designing it to suck our attention in and not let go.
Oh yeah. I mean, and that's the thing. It's so think of how many people use Facebook and social media, and they're letting themselves get sucked in, and they actually use that platform while they're sucked in to rant about that platform sucking them in. And it's almost like, it's.
Wow.
So it's understanding those, and again, it's just really developing the brain muscle, so we can think about our thinking, and we can observe things and then ask, is this really serving me? Is this where I want to go? And if not, then what do I need to do to change it? And being able to observe that observer.
Yeah. I think that's a super valuable shift. If people are willing to take the steps to do it. That's great. Well, this has been great. I've appreciated the variety of topics and the depth of wisdom that you seem to have with each of them. And so we covered some health, some wealth, including tax strategy, and we'll have links below for some of this. Just living life with a higher quality of life by utilizing some of these strategies. If we don't have our wealth, or if we don't have our health, wealth doesn't matter.
Right.
And once we have our health and our wealth, our quality of life can be whatever we're choosing to live, or if it's really our destiny or fate, or but those will be definitely undermined if we don't have our health and our wealth.
Absolutely, 100%.
So I appreciate you sharing on all of this today.
Jeremy, you're welcome. It's been great. It's been a lot of fun. I enjoy dialoguing with you.
Great. Awesome. Same here. Look forward to perhaps more down the line. So
sounds good. Thank you, Jeremy.
Right. Thanks again. And thanks to the listeners. Much love.